He stopped arguing, stopped explaining, stopped chasing, and suddenly she panicked. Not because he yelled, not because he left, but because he went silent. That's the moment every modern relationship fears, when a man no longer reacts, because in a world addicted to noise, silence feels like death. See, modern love isn't built on peace, it's built on stimulation, constant feedback loops of attention, emotion, and validation. Every message, every argument, every apology is a heartbeat that keeps the illusion alive. We're still connected. But the moment a man stops responding, the moment he removes his energy, the entire illusion collapses. And she feels it. Not in her ears, but in her ego. Because silence isn't just quiet. It's absence of control. It's the one language that can't be manipulated, argued with, or decoded. He's not explaining why he's hurt. He's not defending his boundaries. He's not trying to prove his worth. He's just done peacefully. And that peace, that's what terrifies her the most. Because she was taught that chaos means passion, that love means noise, that emotion, even the destructive kind, is proof of importance. So when he withdraws, she doesn't see calmness. She sees punishment, abandonment, rejection. She'll say, "You don't care anymore." But what she really means is, "I can't reach you anymore." That's the paradox of modern love. The louder one side becomes, the quieter the other must be to survive. Because every man reaches a breaking point, that invisible threshold where defending yourself starts to feel like self-destruction. And when he crosses it, something inside him changes. He no longer argues to be understood. He no longer seeks validation through conflict. He realizes that peace isn't found through being heard. It's found through being still. That's when she notices. His eyes no longer spark with reaction. His tone no longer shifts when she raises hers. His body language no longer dances between defense and devotion. She'll call it emotional detachment, but it's really emotional mastery because silence, for a man, isn't retreat. It's rebirth. It's the moment he stops being a participant in someone else's chaos and becomes the guardian of his own peace. And in that silence, something profound happens. She hears, maybe for the first time, the sound of her own noise. The accusations, the tests, the games, all echoing back with no one left to absorb them. That's the sound of truth returning, and it's deafening. So when modern women say they hate when men go silent, they're not really hating the silence. They're hating what it reveals, because silence doesn't lie. It only exposes who can live without constant validation and who can't. Every argument used to end the same way, her voice rising, his words stumbling, the same loop repeating under different disguises. Until one day, he simply stopped responding. And that silence felt like violence. Because when a man stops engaging, it's not weakness, it's warfare. Quiet, strategic, and devastatingly effective. See, emotional power doesn't always come from dominance. Sometimes it comes from disengagement, from the moment he decides that peace is more valuable than being understood. When he withdraws, she loses her rhythm. For years, she's relied on the energy he gives off, the emotion, the reaction, the chase. That back and forth tension fed her sense of control. But silence kills the game. No more arguing to win. No more guilt to weaponize. No more emotional leverage. Because silence isn't just the absence of words, it's the removal of power. And that's what makes it so effective. When he walks away from chaos, he's not abandoning her. He's abandoning the role she wrote for him. The one where he's the explainer, the fixer, the one who always proves his love through suffering. Without his reaction, she has no script left to follow. She'll text, she'll test, she'll tempt, anything to reignite the noise. Because noise is control, and silence is exposure. It reveals how much of her sense of worth relied on being the center of his emotional world. It forces her to sit with the void she used to fill with arguments and apologies. It forces her to realize that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the problem. The problem was that she couldn't exist without the chaos. That's why so many modern women call silence cold or cruel. Because peace feels foreign to people who've only ever known connection through conflict. They'll say, real men communicate. But what they really mean is, real men keep engaging, no matter how much damage it causes. But a wise man knows that communication without respect isn't dialogue, it's performance. And he's done performing. When he goes silent, it's not about punishing her, it's about protecting himself. Because every reaction he gives is energy she learns how to control. And every ounce of energy he saves becomes power she can no longer touch. That's the weapon of withdrawal. It doesn't hurt her body. It exposes her psychology. It breaks the illusion that love is measured by how much pain a man is willing to tolerate. He's not trying to win anymore. He's trying to end the game. And that's what makes silence so powerful. It's not passive. It's precision. A single act of non-reaction that says everything words never could. You can't manipulate a man who no longer needs your noise to feel alive. Silence is more than absence. It's reflection. Because when he stops talking, when he stops explaining, arguing, reacting, the noise she used to drown in suddenly fades. And what's left is the mirror. Not the kind made of glass, but the kind made of stillness. Where every word, every action, every manipulation echoes back without interference. That's the danger of silence. It doesn't accuse, it reveals. And what it reveals is everything she's been avoiding. When he no longer feeds her narrative, when he no longer defends himself against distortion, she's forced to confront a version of herself that doesn't look as innocent as she once believed. Because silence removes the distraction of blame. It removes the comfort of conflict. And what's left is accountability. She'll replay old arguments in her head, trying to find the moment where things went wrong. But this time, there's no voice pushing back, no tone to dissect, no reaction to twist. Just her, alone with her own words. That's when she realizes that maybe he wasn't the one who changed. Maybe he just stopped carrying the emotional weight for both of them. Silence forces introspection. And for many modern women, introspection feels like accusation, because the modern relationship has been conditioned around reaction. If he reacts, she feels relevant. If he argues, she feels desired. If he apologizes, she feels powerful. But when he goes quiet, those emotional lifelines disappear. She's no longer the star of the story. She's the subject of the reflection. And that reflection is unforgiving. It shows her how many of her tests were really control, how many of her boundaries were really threats, how much of her communication was really manipulation in disguise. Silence exposes the game by ending it. Because without someone to project onto, she has to look inward. And that's where the chaos begins. The mirror effect is brutal because it's honest. It doesn't care about feelings. It doesn't care about intentions. It simply shows what's true. And the truth is this. She wasn't fighting for connection. She was fighting for control. His silence proves that connection was never lost. It was simply one-sided. He was trying to build peace. She was trying to maintain attention. And now that attention is gone. So, when she says, "You've changed," she's not wrong. But what she doesn't realize is that her reflection changed with him. Because when a man finally finds peace, it forces everyone around him to see how much of their identity depended on keeping him unbalanced. That's the mirror effect. Silence doesn't just reveal who he's become. It reveals who she always was when no one was reacting. Control doesn't vanish in one moment. It fades, slowly, quietly, the same way his voice did. At first, she doesn't notice. She mistakes his calm for confusion, his stillness for hesitation. But soon, something shifts. He's no longer playing the game. He's watching it. And that terrifies her. Because the modern woman's greatest weapon has never been strength. It's influence. Influence over emotion, attention, and energy. But silence removes all three. When a man refuses to react, he rewires the dynamic. The energy that once fed her control now feeds his peace. And the more peace he gains, the more power she loses. This is where panic begins, not because she misses him, but because she can no longer move him. She'll start to provoke. Questions disguised as accusations. Apologies laced with tests. She'll do anything to make him break character, to remind herself she still matters. Because if he reacts, it means she still has access. It means her voice still has weight. It means her chaos still has purpose. But when he stays silent, she sees it. The control slipping through her hands like water. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't defend. He doesn't explain his absence or his calm. And that silence, that unbearable stillness, becomes the loudest no she's ever heard. Because control requires participation. And he's no longer participating. For years she believed she could shape him through emotion. The cold shoulder, the guilt trips, the subtle tests. And for years it worked. Because most men will do anything to restore harmony, to win back warmth, to feel chosen again. But this man, he's past that. He's realized that peace is a boundary, not a request. That explaining himself to chaos only keeps the cycle alive. Now, his silence speaks in ways words never could. It says, I don't need to prove my point anymore. I don't need to fix what refuses to be peaceful. I don't owe you my energy just because you demand a reaction. That's the day control dies. Not because he took it, but because she lost access to it. And as strange as it sounds, his calm becomes her punishment. Because nothing exposes emotional dependence faster than a man who no longer responds. His silence isn't passive. It's power reclaimed. It's the quiet dismantling of manipulation. It's the refusal to perform. And the irony, the more peace he finds, the louder her world becomes. Because once control is gone, chaos has no one left to dance with. That's when she finally understands. His silence wasn't weakness. It was the moment she lost her grip on him forever. It always happens the same way. At first she calls it distance. Then she calls it arrogance. And finally, she calls it coldness. But what she's really feeling isn't rejection. It's loss of control. Because for so long, she defined her power through his response. If she could make him react, she still mattered. If she could make him chase, she still had value. If she could make him feel, she still had control. But now, there's nothing left to provoke. The calm has settled in like a storm after impact. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't match her tone. He doesn't try to fix, explain, or plead. He just watches. And that's what breaks her. Because silence forces exposure. Every manipulative word, every guilt tactic, every emotional outburst, they all hang in the air with no resistance to hide behind. And when there's no one to absorb the chaos collapses on itself. This is the moment where the dynamic flips. The man who once felt powerless becomes untouchable. The woman who once felt dominant begins to spiral. She'll test again. A small comment, a jab, a calculated memory of how things used to be. But nothing sticks. Because his peace isn't performative, it's real. He's no longer reacting to her moods. He's responding to his own boundaries. He's no longer defending his worth. He's embodying it. And that's when the collapse begins. Not of love, but of illusion. Because control only works when the other person is still seeking approval. And this man, has stopped seeking. She'll start asking questions now, not to reconnect, but to reassert. Why are you acting like this? Do you even care anymore? Are you just going to give up? But those words don't land the same way anymore. They sound less like concern and more like panic. Because for the first time she's realizing that she can't reach him. He's not punishing her. He's protecting himself. He's not silent to hurt her. He's silent to heal. And that distinction changes everything. Because the collapse of control isn't loud. It's quiet. It's not dramatic. It's inevitable. It happens the moment a man realizes that peace is more powerful than persuasion. He no longer needs to prove anything. He no longer fears being misunderstood. He's made peace with walking away unspoken. And in that moment, everything that used to control him loses its meaning. Her words, her moods, her validation. All powerless now. Because once a man masters his reaction, no one owns his emotions anymore. That's the collapse of control. When his silence becomes her mirror, and her reflection finally tells the truth she spent years avoiding. It was never about him losing interest. It was about her losing influence. When a man finally stops chasing noise, he doesn't disappear. He reclaims his peace, his focus, his time, his power. Because silence isn't the end of something. It's the beginning of everything he lost while trying to be understood. For years, he poured his energy into explanations that never landed. He traded his clarity for conflict, his boundaries for approval, his purpose for peacekeeping. But silence gave him something words never could. Clarity without compromise. He begins to see life differently now. The arguments that used to drain him feel trivial. The validation he once begged for now feels empty. The chaos that used to pull him in now just passes by. Because peace has become his new language. And only those fluent in calm can speak it back to him. This is the return to power. Not dominance, not revenge, but alignment. He doesn't need to win the breakup, or prove who was right, or chase closure from someone who mistook his love for weakness. His closure is his composure. He's learned that real strength isn't about control. It's about containment. The ability to hold your power without leaking it through reaction. To let others drown in their noise while you rise in your quiet. The same silence she once mocked as cold now feels unshakable. The same stillness she once resented now commands respect. Because peace radiates differently when it's earned through pain. Now, when he speaks, his words carry weight. Not because he's louder, but because he's selective. When he gives his attention, it feels sacred. When he gives his energy, it feels rare. That's what modern women can't stand. That time comes, can't you free, rinner, wemdand, webime, team, whence, when mind, when the man who once needed their approval now values his solitude more than their validation. And the irony, that's the moment they notice him again, because nothing is more magnetic than a man who no longer seeks to be seen. He becomes an archetype of calm, a reminder of everything she tried to control but couldn't, a symbol of what happens when a man reclaims his peace from the chaos that once consumed him. He didn't go silent to hurt her. He went silent to hear himself again. And in that silence, he found the voice that matters most, the one that was buried beneath years of defending, explaining, and proving. Now he moves differently. He speaks less, but says more. He loves slower, but deeper. He doesn't chase connection. He creates it. That's the return to power. The moment a man realizes that his energy was never lost, it was just misplaced in people who couldn't handle its stillness. So when modern women say they hate when men go silent, what they really hate is that silence made him stronger than they ever imagined.